Hi, everybody. This is Donna with Caroline's Daughter. Tonight I'm taking part in a collaboration that is hosted by Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling and Shelly at Repurposed My Way. I have done some rustic things. No, that's not true. I have done one rustic thing in the past, and it's that candle right there, that battery-operated candle to the right. I put it on that thrifted candle holder, tiered candle holder, and I put some of that moss in it, that dried moss. Is that reindeer moss? I think it is. I'm not sure. I get the names all wrong. Anyway, I had it sitting up for fall and it looked really cute. And I thought this oil rubbed bronze look on the tiered candle holder could look really good if I made it more primitive. So for this video, I decided to paint it black, and I am using Waverly ink, I think it is. I'm painting it black, and then I'm using a little bit of apple barrel chestnut, just kind of rubbed in with my finger, and then I sprinkled cinnamon on it, and that made it look so good. It made it look like a rusty cast iron pan. Isn't that neat? You guys are probably all like, yeah, it's primitive, rusted, we've done that. I'm just delighted. So for the next project, I wanted to make a sort of rustic, primitive candle holder tray type thing. So I'm starting here with dry clay, air dry clay, and I'm rolling it out. That metal thing that came with a clay kit, that is sharp. I don't know if you guys have any of those, but man. So eventually I rolled out 3 pieces of equal size of the air dry clay, and I put them around that little rolling acrylic thing that I have. And it was actually a perfect fit for the candles that I had next to it. A bunch of thrifted Halloween candles that I got that had melted into different shapes. I thought they'd be cool. 50 cents. So I shaped the clay into candle holders that I am going to let dry and paint with espresso. And I'm going to glue them onto the tray so that I can have 3 little candles on the tray and then set whatever I want on it. I just think it's going to look so cute. There's that rust I was talking about. If you don't put a sealant on wood and items like this with surprise rust, it will come through no matter how many layers of paint you put on it. So I put the sealant on it, and now I'm using a different color paint. I did the same thing that I did with the tiered candle holder on this tray. I used Apple Barrel's chestnut acrylic paint and some cinnamon and just rubbed it in. I think it looks really nice and primitive. I decided to use white candles because I had them instead of the black candles. but they didn't quite fit into the candle holders that I had made out of air dry clay. So I used a vegetable peeler to shave them down, and it worked perfectly. I know that if this were to be a legitimate primitive item, the candles probably wouldn't be white. They'd probably be more of a honey yellow color. But hey, maybe they were made out of coconut wax. So for my third project, I had decided to make a primitive Santa doll. So I looked around at people's patterns and I considered buying a pattern, which I probably should have done. Not only does it help to support people's small business and their creative ventures, but turns out I'm not so good at just freehanding patterns. I had to do that a couple of times. But that's kind of the way I am. I just kind of fly by the seat of my pants and make things up as I go. So here is the shape for the Santa that I ended up going with. I'm going to make him into a kind of a box bottom, and may or may not add legs at this point. So I take the two pieces of canvas and sew them together. And I'm going to put a rip in the back of Santa. Probably could have taken a little more time with this rip. It looks kind of haphazard. But that through that hole, I'm going to stuff him with polyfill. Now, in order to make him sit with that sort of box bottom that I made for him, I sewed along the corners and that made kind of a square bottom like a shopping bag. In order to make him sit, I probably should have added something like sand or beans or rice in the bottom of him so that he would have a little weight down there and it would disperse and help him sit up straight. But I didn't this time around. This is firsties, learning experience. So here we go. I started out trying to close this with a hidden stitch, but I think the way that I had cut the hole at kind of two different angles made it really difficult to hold it together, and perhaps it was slightly overstuffed. So in the end, I gave up and just did a whip stitch to close that puppy. And here I am just taking 2 tubes of canvas, sewing them together in the shape of kind of a finger that they will eventually be his arms. I think that I have enjoyed working with dolls enough now that I am willing to buy a hemostat, a doll making hemostat for stuffing and for pulling cloth out, for turning it inside out. I did a lot of that on this project. And when you're working with long tubes of thick fabric and you need to get that piece turned inside out, I can't imagine anything better than a long hooked clamp to grab the bottom of that fabric. And here we go with an improvised pattern for legs. I used some red ticking and just kind of drew it out, made 2 pieces for each leg, turned the right sides in, and then sewed all around except for the top and stuffed them. Here I folded the top of the leg so that the seam was actually forward, so that his foot would press forward, but the top of the leg would connect to the body. Does that make sense? Next, I took some white yarn. I cut it all to pretty similar lengths, and I glued it to a small strip of fabric. And then I spent a really long time taking all the pieces of yarn and untwisting them so it would look like his hair was a little, or his beard was a little more thick, full and curly. I used Waverly ink paint to paint the bottom of the legs into boots. I did 2 coats, and man, once you put 2 coats of acrylic paint on a cloth like this, it becomes so hard, like you can hear it tapping on the mat that I'm using. They remind me of Flint Lockwood's shoes. And why can't I think of the name of the movie? It's something about meatballs, right? Still flying, still by the seat of my pants. This is where I decide that the original cute little shirt that Santa had on wasn't going to be enough, and I needed to make an actual Santa coat. I pinned the hood into place, and then I just took some red thread and whip stitched it to the coat. Next thing I'm doing is making a tube out of some quilt batting, which for some reason took me way back to my childhood. It was like a memory I didn't know that I had. Someone must have made me a Santa, or we bought a Santa that actually had quilt batting for the fluffy part of his robe. Does anyone have that memory? Is that a common thing? Anyway, I made a tube out of the quilt batting and then pressed it flat so that the seam was in the back, in the middle, and laid it along the front of the coat. And now I'm making another tube to lay along the bottom of his coat, making his furry trim. Then I made a third tube of batting and turned that into his little arm trim. So I was so scared to start putting the art on his face. I was really terrified that I would mess it up. But I just started. I just dove into it. You know, the only way out is through, right? So I grabbed some colored pencils and I started kind of marking up where I wanted things. And I know I said I wanted a primitive Santa, but as I started putting things on him, I realized I don't want him to be that dirty. I don't want him to be grungy. And I kind of don't want his eyes to be small. I made them big. So in the end, I think that this is really more of a folk art Santa based on how the painting on his face turned out and the fact that I didn't put any grunge on his clothes or on the fabric of his body or anything like that. When you see how he turned out, let me know what you think. I took several pieces of the unwound yarn and I sewed them together at the center to make sort of the center of his mustache, and then I just hot glued it on. And now I'm fully committing to Santa's face by using acrylic art pens. One last tube of batting because I forgot to put it on his hood. Now what do I do with that candle that I had made, my early grunge experiment? I took a tart pan that I got from the Goodwill and I filled it back with the reindeer moss, and I cut out some blue homespun that I thought would be perfect for winter, not necessarily Christmas, but nice for winter, and wrapped it around it. And that's it. I just kind of frayed the edges and wrapped it around it and made it look like it was primitive. I love it. So there is my tray that I turned into a candle holder, looking gorgeous. And there's the cute rustic candle that I had made, just stuck in the tart pan with the moss and the homespun. And this is what I did with the two-tiered candle holder that I made more rustic. I think they would all look lovely on anyone's table in the winter or Christmas. I have to say that one right there is my favorite. And there is my first Santa doll. I'm pretty happy with him. He wasn't what I envisioned in the beginning, but I like that about him. I like that creativity requires or inspires change. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you learned something. I know I did. Until we meet again, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.